Hello and welcome to your 9th tutorial on CSS. Today we're going to be talking about the element responsive. And so I believe I briefly mentioned this in an earlier video. And so basically what it does is it makes your web page look good on all devices. And it only uses HTML and CSS. And it's not a program or a JavaScript. And so to start off, we're going to make some divs in our body tag, and we're going to be using the ID attributes, and we're going to name it this time D1. And let's close our div and let's duplicate it 6 times or so, and let's give them their numbers, so 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and do the same thing here, so add text to it. Here we go. And so let's give them some properties using our CSS code. And so our selectors should look like this. So if we want to select all of them, this is what we have to do. You should probably remember this. And so let's give them properties like width. And so we're going to be using a different measurement today, just to link it with our responsive element. And this is going to be, for the first one, VW. So let me just write it here so you know what it is. And this is basically viewport width. So the viewport is the user's visible area of a web page. And so on a desktop we see the full screen, on a mobile phone we see the specified area of our screen, etc. And so the viewport varies with the device. And it will be smaller on a mobile phone than on a computer screen, just like I mentioned. We can do this exact same thing with height. So change it to height, and so we have to change the W with a H, which is basically viewport height. So it's the height of our viewports. And let's also add in a border, and let's write double, so a simple border today. And let's add in a margin left, and let's make it to 5%. Let's add in a float left, so they're lined up all next to each other and it looks nice and neat. Save and refresh, and this is what we get. So we got 6 boxes with our text and our double borders. And so when we change our window size, you can see that the divs are getting smaller, however the numbers aren't, as they're not even big enough. And let's also add in a font size. So let's make our fonts a little bit bigger, and font size 20. Now let's make it 10 VH. And so now when we save and refresh, we get our bigger text. And so when I change the size of my web page, you can see that the boxes are getting smaller. So if I do it from the right, which is from the width, you can see that the text does not get smaller and my boxes do. And so if I do it from the bottom, which is using my height, you can see that my text gets smaller according to the size of my web page. And this is due to my font size being 10 VH. And so if I change this with a W, it will be the exact opposite. And so from the right, so from the width, my text does get smaller, so do my boxes. And from the height, my text just overlaps and it just looks weird, and it is not using the viewport. And besides VW and VH, we have some other values like vmin. So this is viewpoint minimum. It's basically 1% of our viewpoint's smaller dimension. And so now when I save and refresh, okay, and let's also bring this back to 10 as it's too big. Okay, and now from the width, using the width, my text is getting smaller. And using the height, it is also getting smaller. And so if I make it bigger, it's still getting bigger. And so as the viewport is the area where the browser renders the site, vmin is basically, as I mentioned, 1% of the viewport smallest side, let's say. So basically the sizing is based on the minimum of the two browser window dimensions, rather than basing it solely on width or height. And so from the dimensions, here you can see it. And so let's move on and let's change vmin with vmax, which is the maximum. And then we'll save and refresh. You can see that it's basically 1% of the larger dimension, and it's basically the opposite. So the text gets smaller according to the smaller value / dimension. And so if we do something like this to our web page, you can see that the text is actually working and is getting bigger. And so this is using the larger dimension, which is the height. So the exact opposite of vmin. And so everything is according to the height for vmax. And let's move on and let's add in a body selector. And inside of it, let's give it a background URL. And so it's also in the folder pictures GIFs. So I have to do this. And so do you if it's also in a folder. And the name of it is bg1.jpg. And so when I save and refresh, we get this image just on our background. And now let's also add in no repeats, as I don't want it to be repeated. Here we go. And let's give it a background size and let's make it cover, so it will cover the whole page. And let's also give the color of our text white. And so when we save and refresh, we get this. So we have our background and we have our boxes with our text in white. And so the next thing that we'll do is we're going to add in an @ and we're going to write in media only screen, and now we're going to write in these brackets the max width, which is going to be 450 pixels. And we're going to open our curly brace and close it. And so inside of these curly braces, we're going to write another body selector. And inside of this body selector, we're going to give it a background URL. And so it's the same thing as this essentially. So I will copy and paste it here, and I'll just change it to 2 as it's named like that in my folder. And we'll also add the no repeat property. And let's also add in a background size cover as well. Size and cover. And now let's save and refresh. And so right now we have this blue background, and when I make my tab smaller to 450 pixels, you can see that it automatically just changes to this other picture, which is bg2.jpg. And so this website will be effective for mobile phones. So if you're going to go to this website using a mobile, this is how your page will look. And if you're going to use a tablet or a small notebook, it will look like this. So we'll have this blue background. And so the maximum width to get this reddish background is, as we made it, 450 pixels. And so it needs to be less than 450 pixels to work. And if it's bigger, it will just go back to the blue background, which is BG1. And we can change our max width to min width, so minimum. And we can just change it to 480 if we like. And when we save and refresh, it will be the opposite. So on a notebook or a tablet, it will look like this. However, on a mobile phone, it will look something like this, using the blue background, and the minimum is 480. Just so you know what we're talking about here. So we'll name this one mobile, as it's for mobiles, just so you know what we're talking about. And we'll name this one tablet, and so it can also work with netbooks, so small notebooks. And so now let's copy this, let's paste it just after, and let's change tablet with desktop, and let's change our minimum width to 768 because that is the minimum for desktops. And so let's change this to BG3 as it's the third one in my file. And now when I save and refresh, and so let's start off with the smallest one. So this is going to be for mobiles, this is going to be for tablets or netbooks, and this is going to be for desktop. So it needs to be bigger than 768 pixels to work, which is around this. This is 768 pixels, and so to show you better, this is mobile, netbook slash tablet, and this is desktop. And so let's copy and paste it again just after this third one, and let's make the minimum width 992 pixels, and let's also change the file again. So for me it's BG4. And now when I save and refresh, let me just bring it here. Mobile phones, tablets or anything like that, our desktop, and this is going to be a slightly bigger computer, so like an iMac or something. And yeah, you can just mess around with different pictures, and you can see which sizes work for your devices. And so let's just copy this and paste it down here, and let's get rid of everything but D2, and let's change its values to 30 VW and 30 VH. So now when I save and refresh this, you can see that for my tablet view, number 2 will be bigger, and so if it's smaller, as you can see it's way bigger. And you can just also mess around with the other divs and see which is suitable for your own website. And yeah, so that was all that I had prepared for today. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.